Hey, Milky here, back again with another one. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope 2023 is kicking off with a bang for you. Thanks so much for the support last year. It was a crazy year, beyond things that I could ever imagine. Thank you so much for the support, and this year we're going to go even more, so thank you for being on this journey with me. Today we're going to jump in and look at the top 5 decks that are my go-to decks that I go to at the start of every single season. Now, at the start of every single season, the meta often shifts. There's new cards that enter the game, people's rank gets reset, there's people playing all different random things, trying out things, but I've learned over time, over getting infinite in all of the seasons I've played. I think it's 7 seasons now that I've played in. I've learned that going to these consistent decks have really helped me set myself up for success for the rest of my climb and getting all the way to infinite. So I've got these decks which I lean on, which really hone in on some things that are consistent, that are tried and tested, and that do very well for me. Now, at the start of every season, with the craziness of the ranked reset, with all of the different cards coming into the game, with different changes in the game and potential patch updates, lots of things get shaken up, and this can be a really, really good time to either skyrocket up the ladder, or potentially on the other side of that, some people plummet. And I actually experienced that myself a couple of seasons ago. So from that, I've learned, and I've lent on these decks which do consistently, they either help me learn the meta and minimize my losses, or they help me kind of skyrocket up and get some early levels under my belt. So today we're going to jump in and look at those top 5 decks, which I consider to be my early climbing decks to help set me up for success in every season of MarvelSNAP. Alright, so first up, we've got this Ultron deck. There's the Ultron Zoo deck. It was originally put forward to me many months ago back in beta by a guy called Elusive GG. But this deck really revolves around slamming the board with all sorts of early game cards. With your 1-drops, you've got the Kazaa buff there, and then you've got your Ultron to refill that if you do get killmongered. There's often a lot of win conditions in this deck with Wave and Blue Marvel and Onslaught. You can potentially get out an early Onslaught, doubling down on all of that buff. It works well regardless of whether you have 1-drops out on the board or you're refilling with Ultron. If you don't have Ultron in your hand and you get killmongered, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult. But I found this deck incredibly consistent, not only in the way it plays out, but as a deck to test the meta. What I mean by that is you can often minimize cube loss with this deck because of how the games play out. If it's not going in your favor early on and you haven't drawn Ultron, you can often minimize your losses, or it's surprise plays late on in the game which can help you win those big cube matches. It's a great deck that I go to every single season. It's helped me in number of climbs to get to infinite. But I go to this deck every single season because it's something that is consistent, and it's a great deck to test out the meta and find out what other people are playing. So another deck that I absolutely go to every single season to play, and this is the version that I have. This is more of the Baero version of the deck, but you could lean on more into your Deathwave styles of the deck, and this is my preferential choice of how I build the deck, but you know, there's lots of different ways to build it. And potentially with card changes, maybe leader getting changed or other cards coming up, this could potentially change. But this Death Row deck, or what I'm calling Death Row, but Baero essentially, this deck just does very, very well in the current state of the meta. I think it's kind of meta resistant. This deck has, and unless the cards get changed, this deck has always done very, very well. Ever since even the early beta of the game, Deathwave was just a combo that was just, you know, played and consistent in everything that it does. I think the additions of Aero and Leader in this deck take it to the next level. So I think for me, this is one that I lean on heavily in a lot of climbs, especially when you're finding that you get stuck. And sometimes you'll find that throughout various points on the ladder, is that you get stuck. And at those points, I cycle back to this deck, and it can often, you know, springboard me to the next tier, to the next milestone, whatever it might be, and get me out of those tough spots. So, Baero, Deathwave styles of decks, this one is definitely something that I've gone to. I think, you know, bringing that up the next level with She-Hulk has also been something that I've really enjoyed as well. But even without Series 4 cards, this deck does incredibly well. All right, next up we have the Spectrum Destroyer deck, a deck with multiple win conditions, which I think is a great deck to test the meta. This is almost one of those decks which I go to first. Maybe the first game that I play is often with this deck. And it's something that I've started to lean on in the most recent seasons, probably the last 2 or 3 seasons, as a deck to jump into and test out the new season early on. I think because it has multiple win conditions, being Destroyer or the Spectrum playline, it does very well. Daredevil helps you with minimizing cube loss and cube management. I think the nature of the deck, it has a different approach to the game where you've got this win condition with ongoing cards, you've got this win condition with the Destroyer style of deck. I think it's difficult to counter in a lot of ways, and it just feels really good to test out the meta and see what other people are playing. So I've lent on this deck. It's done very well for me in the early stages of a lot of climbs, and I definitely recommend it if you're looking to test out and see what other people are playing. All right, next up we have Sera Miracle, and this deck has just grown on me each and every season. It's become, I think this is, again, one of the best decks in the game. It's something that's not high rolly in any way, shape, or form. It's just incredibly consistent in what it does. It's also hard to predict what this deck is when you start playing it out on the board. Often it kind of starts out as potentially a destroy deck or even a hand-sized deck. So it's difficult to get a read on exactly what it is. But then it kind of curves out really, really well. You've got strong plays throughout the game. You've got counter plays with Shang-Chi and Enchantress. An insane final turn with potentially Sera or Baero, Leader even. Depends whether if these really strong cards do get changed, this deck might shift about a bit. But at the moment, this deck is definitely a go-to for me to test the meta, to see how the new cards land before testing them out myself, to potentially gain a bunch of sneaky ranks early on in the season. If you haven't built this deck, definitely try it out. Again, we'll see where the patch changes or if there's any updates or nerfs to these cards. But in the current state of the game, this deck is kind of insane. I definitely encourage you to build it and try it out in your early games of the season. All right, the last deck that I want to highlight is whatever deck comes out of the brand new card. I'm a Battle Pass only player, just so everyone knows, and I do pick up the Battle Pass every season to get access to that brand new Season Pass card. This season, we know it's going to be Zabu, and he's going to have a crazy ongoing ability where your 4-cost cards cost 2 less. So potentially some insane plays there with Zabu. I think Zabu is going to be an interesting one for sure. Potentially meta-shaping, actually, in a lot of ways, I think. But for the most part, whenever a new season launches, I play through my consistent decks, and then once decks kind of seem to be landing, or I'm theory crafting something myself with the new season card, and I want to try it out, I've maybe got to a comfortable spot, I've maybe got myself up a few levels, and I think I've seen how the card already plays out. I jump in and give the new card a crack, and I'll be doing the same with Zabu. I think I'll probably try out my Ultron Zoo decks, my Sera Miracle decks, probably my Destroyer Spectrum deck. I'll be trying out all of those, and then I'll jump in and give Zabu a crack in a different deck and see how it shapes up. And I think that's a really good spot to be, having consistent decks that you can go to, and then being able to move into playing with the new season card. At least that's going to be my approach, and something that's served me well. I think setting myself up to success early with some consistent decks that are tried, tested, and that I know, and then moving into more of these flavor style decks with the new season card. All right, so those are my top 5 decks that I play with at the start of every single season. Look, sometimes I tweak cards in and out depending on the meta and depending on what I'm versing, but for the most part, those are the decks that I land on to test out the new season. Things that are going to be really, really consistent for me. Things that I can manage cubes with and do very well with, and potentially minimize my losses while maximizing my wins. Potentially get out some sneaky cubes and skyrocket up the ladder early on. So I hope that's helped some of you in your new season of MarvelSNAP, which is coming very, very soon. Let me know in the comments what you do at the start of every season. Love to hear from you. Again, subscribe to the channel, like the video, all that good stuff. And until the next one, I'll see you then.